I built a simple multiplayer game, and I'd like to share my architecture and my design with you. In this video, I'll go over the player controller and replication. That includes multicast and replicating to the server. This video will be all you need to know about designing multiplayer games. The player controller strictly has one job, and that's to receive inputs and then to pipe those inputs to the actual character. So right here, I'm using enhanced input action. You can look into that in a different video. And all my player controller is doing is just sending that to the character. The character itself will take that and then actually implement the logic. So in this case, nothing happens if you try to scroll on a sail. If you try to use the scroll on a wheel, nothing happens, but on a cannon, it'll tilt the barrel. The reason we have this distinction is so that you can move from any character to another, and more importantly, other types of controllers can possess that character. So if I wanted to tilt the barrel with an AI controller, all I have to do is set the AI player controller to access this exact function, and I don't have to repeat the same methodology of creating a new, scroll interact. I just have to reuse it. The next core concept I'm going to go over is the server and the clients. So in my system, the way that I have it set up, one of the players will be both a server and a client. So the server is actually running the game, and the clients are just player controllers and their pawns. So a client owns only the player controller and the actual pirate that is assigned to that player controller. So that player cannot interact with any other thing inside of the environment. So how do we communicate from the player to the server and from the server back to the player? So for Unreal 5, we use replication. So you can replicate variables, functions, and actors. There are 3 types of replication that you can do. By default, nothing's replicated. Every instance, every client has their own instance of a given object, and they're distinct. So if you change an object in your client, the other clients won't understand, or they won't get a signal because it's not linked to the server. Multicast, that is a message from the server to all clients. Run on server is a message from a client to the server, and run on owning client sends a message from the server to a distinct client. In our case, our pirate, our player character that the controller has access to, can call on server events for each of its distinct actions that it's performing inside of the world. So on scroll interact, you see I have it running on server. This player character will send this scroll interact event to the server, and then the server will be playing the game and use this as well. Now on server events, you may try to use them in different places, but you can only use on server on things that your controller possesses. And to keep it very simple, just think that you can only use run on server in your player controller and inside of your player character. No other place it's going to work unless you want to get into possession. The last thing I'm going to go over is multicast. So multicasting is a message from the server to every client. So you'll use this for information that you want to send to every player from the server. So in our case, with tilting barrel, inside of our pirate, we run scroll interact, and we do it on server. So we're telling our server to start executing this tilt barrel function. So now we go over to our cannon, And in our cannon, we want to tell every client that we're tilting the barrel, and we need to set our new barrel tilt. Otherwise, it will only happen on the server. So to do that, you'll just, for instance, if it just wasn't replicated before, you'll just go into your custom event, click on multicast, and now it's set up. For replicating variables, it actually gets easier. So in this case, I have this variable sales set distance, and the only thing you have to worry about if you want this to be replicated throughout the client and the server is just setting this replicated variable. So originally it's none, you can set it to replicated, or if you want an event, whenever it gets updated, then you set rep notify. This variable is maintained on the server because remember, your character, your controller, only possesses your controller and your given actor, the pawn that's possessed by the controller. So whenever you see replicated for a variable, remember generally that it's server owned and that it's just being sent down to the individual clients. That's going to be it for this video. Yeah, I kept it kind of short, but that's really because Unreal makes multiplayer kind of easy. And if you stick to this structure where you're only using the player controller for inputs and you're using on server inside of the player character, that's really most of what you have to worry about with your multiplayer game. And if you stick to this design structure, multiplayer will be easy to make. One key thing I want to share is that you should also focus on multiplayer extremely early inside of your development, because it's a lot easier when you're working in this design flow to add a new feature than it is to adapt an old feature to this design model.